Hello and welcome to the AVForums podcast for Wednesday, the 28th of January 2015. It's still the future. Joining me in this edition, Assistant Editor Steve Withers.
I'm not in the business. I am the business.
Games Editor Mark Botwright.
There's some of me in you.
And audio reviewer Ed Selley.
He can breathe okay as long as nobody unplugs him.
Right, okay. I guess we've got to catch up on the important things that are happening in the AV world at this moment in time. So, Steve, how's your pussy search going?
Took their advice. Went along on Friday morning. Got to see all the new cats that had just arrived, and bagged a really cute 8-month-old kitten who will be called Gizmo.
You've got to watch when you say things like "got a bagged a kitten."
Yeah, we reserved. So now it's being evaluated, and then they'll give it a chip, microchip it, and not give it a chip, but microchip it, and give it all its injections and spay it. We also have to have our home visit so we can get vetted. Being appropriate.
It is ridiculous. You don't have to do this to actually have a human child.
I know. Yeah, I know. Let any idiot be a parent, but apparently
they're just nosy. They just want to come around and have a look at your house.
And then once that's all done, we can go and pick her up. So hopefully next week she'll be sorted.
What's the make and model?
I don't know. It's not
four-leg drive.
Yeah. It's
actually, earlier on Skype, I was interrogating Steve in much the same way, and I asked what colour the cat was, and just out of sheer hi-fi journo sort of lingo practice, I was about to ask Steve what finish the cat was. Covered in a smart walnut veneer,
white with short hair.
So you don't know what make and model it is, then?
No, I don't. She's very cute though. Big golden eyes, white with little black patches around her head and ears.
You sure it's not a lemur? Has he got fingers, Steve? You've got to be careful with these things.
Opposable thumbs. It's the next stage in cat evolution before they take over the world. So, yes, fingers crossed, by the next podcast, we might even possibly have her. Or definitely the one after that.
As long as you pass the house vetting
test. Yeah.
Okay.
They may not let me have it when we see the dungeon and all that sort of stuff.
I wonder if they'll give you like a kind of cat version Voight Kampf test.
We'll come back to that later, actually.
Okay. Before we go to hardware news, latest competitions that are running on the site. Ed, why don't you tell us about them?
Just let me get my running order back. I was checking something else. We've got more competitions than you can shake several sticks at. As of 26th, when this podcast is being recorded, to go out on the 28th. That means that you'll only have one day to get your name down for the Saving Private Ryan Blu-ray, which closes a day later. If you haven't already seen it, well, I don't know what's wrong with you, but as I understand it, it's a very, very fine implementation of a good film. Also closing on the same day, Man with No Name trilogy Blu-ray set. That's all the Clint Eastwood you can handle, and possibly some more. To be honest, I have to admit I've never seen any of those three films, and I'm barred from entering the competition. But nonetheless, Steve, you were quite excited, quite enthusiastic about it, so I have no reason to doubt that it's some cop. I'm on safer ground with the next two. You've got until the 5th of Feb. For the Sound Magic E10s. There's 3 pairs of those from memory. I've said it on all sorts of podcasts now. Every time we mention this competition, they are really, really good. So if you're scooting around for a pair of earphones for free, get your ass down there into that competition. We've got Yamaha's SRT 1000 soundstage for the 16th of Feb. Review is out for that reasonably soon, is it not?
This week, probably. Yes.
Fine. So you can enter now if the fancy takes you, but you should be able to read our thoughts on it, and I imagine it's probably going to be pretty damn good. And then finally, with no closing date that I can see
20th of February.
20th of Feb. So you've got ages on this one. Get concentrating on the Blu-rays first. Devolo D-LAN Powerline kit. So bit of Ethernet over mains. Very easy way of getting better web coverage if you live in a castle or a building made out of uranium, or other reasons why your wireless just isn't working properly. So well worth a look.
Okay, so that's the competitions that are running on the site. Let's move on to hardware news. Let's keep it nice and slick. We're bang on message at the minute. So, Steve, Denon AVR-X5200, the review's gone up. We discussed it slightly last week in the podcast. So now you've had time to live with it. I understand you now own it.
I do, yes, I do own it. Yes, I bought one. So much that I liked it so much that I actually bought one, which didn't used to be a tagline for. Was it Remington or something like that?
I liked it so much. I bought the company
so much. I bought it. Yeah. I didn't buy Denon and Marantz, the company. I should point that out.
No, we don't pay you that much.
But I did. But now the X5200 is no longer the flagship model. It has to be said. There is now the X7200.
Did that give you a moment of buyer's remorse?
No, not really, because I looked through specs and it's got a little bit more amplification, but basically it looks pretty much the same, to be honest. It's still 9-channel. I haven't sort of stuck another couple of channels in there or anything like that. AVR-X5200, absolutely superb receiver in my opinion. First of all, as is often the case with Denon, they tend to be at the forefront of new tech. I remember buying a Denon receiver years ago because it had DTS ES on it, for those that remember it.
Yeah.
Yep, and I think I had 2 discs for it at the time. I think I had The Haunting, which was awful, and Gladiator, which was a lot better. But they're always at the sort of forefront of new tech, and this is no exception because they have...
Got to say, the bass sweeps in that was unbelievable, The Haunting.
Yeah. There was some serious low-end action in that movie. Pity the film was utter rubbish.
It was always the go-to disc, though, once you tuned the subs just to check that there wasn't any rattles in the room.
I tell you, if you want a new disc to do that with and a better film, I have to be said, Oblivion, for when the one of the power stations blows up.
It's on my to-do list.
Yeah, it's got some. I remember watching the film while I was reviewing the Datasat combo, and I discovered new rattles I didn't know were there. At that
Admit it, Steve, you pooed yourself.
It was so sealed, so much low end, and that was unbelievable.
The beginning, it must be a Tom Cruise thing, because the beginning of Edge of Tomorrow, there's just a random series of thuds right at the start, which actually the sub that was in at the time when I watched that hit the end stop, which came as a bit of a surprise.
Anyway, so as I said, they're always at the forefront of new tech, and this is no exception because the X5200 was one of the first receivers to include Dolby Atmos, and with the aid of a new firmware update, although it will cost you about £100 to get it, you can also add Auro 3D. So you can get all of the current immersive sound formats. I'm pretty sure it won't be upgradable to DTS-X. Apparently, that's the rumor anyway. Having said that, since we know absolutely nothing about DTS-X at the moment, who knows? It's not even going to be announced until March. And I have a sneaking suspicion that basically DTS-X are just trying to sort of steal a bit of thunder away from Dolby by sort of making very, vague announcements and vaporware, without actually having anything to follow it up. But we'll see. In terms of performance, it was great. It's a really good, solid performer.
Is it as good as the Anthem 710 that you just got rid of, or
for 7.1?
For just normal surround?
No, the Anthem still has the edge particularly in terms of room EQ.
So basically, you've made a compromise here to go with the multi-channel.
Yeah, because I wanted the extra, the new formats.
Okay, I just wanted to check whether you would
have replaced the Anthem otherwise, because the Anthem is a really, really amazing receiver. But having said that, don't get me wrong, the X5200 has got more amplification for one thing, and it's still a really good performer. You get a really lively, well integrated sound, surround sound, nice sound field, good front sound stage, lovely panning and moving of effects around the room. I mean, it's a really good performance. Sounds good music. Not as good with music as the Anthem. The Anthem is I think, in a class of its own amongst receivers in terms of its musicality, but it's also very good with music. Obviously, it's got all the bells and whistles you can imagine any receiver having. I've always had a bit of a soft spot for the design of Denons. I think they look nice. It's not rewriting the design, format here. It's the classic AVR with a big knob on either side and a display in the middle, and a drop-down flap. But what they have done, which is interesting, and I think more manufacturers should follow their suit here, is that they have made a real effort to make their receivers, this is both Denon and Marantz in fairness because it's the same company, to make their receivers less daunting, particularly to sort of neophytes, because they've simplified the rear connections. So there's a total of 8 HDMI inputs and 3 HDMI outputs, but they've got rid of a lot of legacy stuff that you're not going to use. So there's a few in there still, but it's nowhere near as it's not the massive connections that you see sometimes on the backs of receivers. And they've put all the speaker terminal connections, binding posts, all in a straight line, making them easier to get to. Which anyone who's ever tried to wire up a receiver will know what a nightmare that can be at times. It can take just about any type of connection you want to put into those terminals, which is good. They've simplified the menu system, which also looks very attractive. There's a setup wizard you can follow through to help you set everything up, which again is very effective. The remote control is also simplified and easier to use. My only complaint about the remote control is it doesn't have a backlight, but they do have a remote app, which is very good as well. And you can control it using your tablet if you want, just by putting in the IPS address or the DNS address. And then, so there's multiple ways you can control it, not just the remote control, all of which I have to say are very effective. It's well designed, it's nicely made, it's good build quality, it sounds great, it's got everything you could possibly want in terms of features, it's got all the new audio formats. And you can pick it up for about 1,300 quid from some places, which is an absolute bargain, really. So for me, highly recommended, no question about it.
Okay, so let's move on and stay with audio. Strangely enough, no video in this hardware section this month. What have you been looking at, Ed?
Well, up on the site already is a review of the Cabasse Stream One, which it's a funny looking thing. My wife did point out it looks on occasions a bit like a George Foreman grill, but it's
if
really
you could combine the two, that would be my dream.
Well, yes, all right. Notes to Cabasse there. If you can get a hot plate into the system, brilliant. But what it is, it's unable to make toasted sandwiches, but it can operate very effectively as an all-in-one streaming system, either using standard streaming and material over network from a NAS drive. There is aptX Bluetooth, Spotify Connect, and internet radio as a result of the UPnP part of it. And it all works rather well, and it sounds really rather smart. If you were looking at the name Muso and you think 800 quid is a bit more than I was intending to spend, this is £300 cheaper. It isn't as good, but it is extremely good for the £500 asking price. So I thoroughly enjoyed listening to it. And as an aside, something sort of useful with regards to both this and the Denon that Steve's just reviewed. Further to the review I did last year of the Tidal streaming service, since we last podcasted, there's been a modification to one of the Android apps, Bubble, which is a free app which you can use on any Android device. You can now select, if you have a Tidal subscription, you can select Tidal as your server on Bubble and then beam it to a UPnP compatible device. So if you've been sort of thinking, I like some of these products, but I'd be more interested in a bit more integration, so on and so forth, that effectively gives you a free method of getting Tidal onto these bits of equipment, which is quite handy as well.
Ed, do you think there's an actual market there for these types of systems? I mean, at the minute I'm reviewing the Pure Jongo, which is a wireless system, basically kind of the same thing. You've got to use the app to basically feed everything through the app. Do you think there's a market for this kind of thing? And if there is, do you think that the products here are aimed at the right level when it comes to the consumer?
This is a very tough one to call, Phil. It would appear that the right system, all-in-one sort of streamers, are doing rather well. Going back to the name Muso, that seems to have found it seems to be going well in various retailers, including John Lewis and the like. And Sonos continues to sell extremely well. I do think you have a point in so much as if you're trying to break into this market, it looks to be tough going. There's undoubtedly demand for these products, but it does seem to be that there are category killers at each price point. And if you're not one of those category killers, I honestly don't know how many of these things you sell.
And from the usability point of view, this is what really surprised me, because this is the first system I've looked at in probably about 2 years when it comes to wireless speakers and using the application to run most of the stuff. I mean, you can run NAS drives and stuff through it, but you've got to use the app to do that.
Yeah.
I just found it so confusing. And usually I'm quite up on these things, and I can usually solve the issue myself. I had to resort to going to the support pages to find out what the hang was going on and why I couldn't do certain things. And for the consumer, that has to be a bore.
No, absolutely. It's interesting. I note in the review for the Cabasse, the initial app that they released it with had some similar issues. It just wasn't that slick. Shortly after I plugged in the review sample, a new app went live, and there's no question at all that makes it a vastly better product to use. If you are pushing app control, it stands to reason that the product lives or dies on how good that app is, and then that in turn ties into stability and speed and all the other bits and bobs. It also means that if you are trying to sell to a clientele that isn't that comfortable using control apps, people same age as my parents, so on and so forth, then you really then have to sort of go out of your way to explain why you'd bother in the first place. I mean, it's like going back to my parents. My dad is another name owner, and he looks at the equipment that I use, which can be driven through the iPad and does all sorts of bells and whistles. And his major question is sort of why. As far as he's concerned, it's a case of put a CD in it and off it goes. It's just a mindset thing, and a lot of these all-in-one systems really are going up against that mindset.
Yeah, I know that. You just have to look around, and there are people who cannot live without their mobile device or their tablet being in their hand. And for those types of people, I can see why this type of system works, because they've always got the smartphone or the tablet on them, so they've always got control over their music. They've always got control over the units and so on. I'm not like that. And I've found it, having to go and fetch my phone or a tablet to control stuff, I've found it strange, to be honest. I guess I'm just getting old.
No, I don't think it's too unusual. And it, as I say, it really does live or die on how good that the app is. It's interesting. I mean, when I reviewed the Pioneer LX87 last year, I was fairly dismissive of its app. The app was quite good, but it was such a pain in the proverbial to get the damn thing onto a network in the first place. It was more like just sort of an interesting demonstration point. Since then, obviously, my son has developed a keen interest in pushing buttons, and I've had a couple of products go through, that 2 Yamaha amps in particular, which have got wireless built in. And now, when the AV amp is behind a big foam panel to prevent having buttons pushed at random and volume control turned up to, oh my God, I'm all of a sudden I'm more appreciative of the control apps. The Yamaha one, actually, it isn't significantly different to the Pioneer one. It's not significantly better, but it's just that much easier to get going. So now the natural point of control for the AV receivers in my house is via iPad. And I didn't see myself doing that as little as a year ago, and now it's very important to me. And I have to say that if I've got the iPad up and running, more often than not, I wind up controlling the Skybox with it as well.
Anybody else got this issue? I mean, Steve, you've looked at some of these systems. Is it natural for you to have your mobile in your hand all the time to control stuff or not?
No, it isn't yet. But I've got to say that my experience of particularly remote apps has been that they are quite often very sophisticated and very handy. And like I said earlier about the remote control that comes with the X5200, which hasn't got a backlight. Now, if you're in a home cinema, using the remote app can be a lot more useful because, clearly it's self-illuminating and you can see what you're doing. So that's kind of useful. I'm not in the habit, unlike perhaps a younger generation, of constantly having my phone on me all the time. I mean, it's no reason why I don't use those health apps, because they only really work if you've constantly got your phone in your pocket, and I don't have it all the time. It's just sitting behind me on on a table or something, and therefore the phone thinks I'm inactive, and they wouldn't be far off the mark there most of the time. But I mean, I'm always amazed at the sophistication that is available in terms of controlling other devices through your smartphone or tablet. And there's no question that it does make life very convenient. And, clearly it's the way of the future, isn't it? I mean, it's just there's going to be more and more dovetailing of those technologies into eventually, every mobile phone will basically be a universal controller.
As long as it works. And this was my thing, coming back to the Pure thing. It was trying to get it to work and trying to get it to do things that I wanted to do. And here's the thing. You got 2 of these T4X speakers. So basically they're speakers that sit on their own, but you can pair them up using Cask ID, which is an offshoot of Bluetooth. I'm not sure if you're aware of it. Ed, if it's been in any of the systems that you've looked at recently.
Yeah, it's turned up on one or two things. The problem is, and actually I cover this in a review that's upcoming. Half the problem, Phil, is trying to work out what standard your device is connected to at Bluetooth. On occasions, I've had things where I've paired up an aptX capable source, a phone rather, and then actually found on some investigation that the other device hasn't liked what it's seen, and even though it's technically aptX capable, it's actually gone in at a lower standard.
Yeah,
so it's a pig to work out what's going on.
Yeah, so obviously this Cask ID, it's being developed by Onkyo and Meridian as well, for wireless speaker systems. So you can have two wireless speakers and pair them as a stereo pair, and they will be in sync. So this is the idea of the whole technology, which told about it, I thought, yeah, great, that sounds fantastic. And when you're using the app and you're using Pure Connect, which is their music streaming system, it works extremely well. Try and do anything else with it and it falls apart. And this is what annoyed me, because I thought, I'll put a speaker either side of the TV, 3.5 jack into one of them, and surely the other one will pair up and it'll be a stereo pair, and it's a nice little AV solution as well as a music streaming solution. Nope, doesn't work. And you just think, well, who's designing these systems? Because you would think maybe it's just because we're AV nuts, and when there's speakers near we'll wire the TV through them. No, you can't do it, and it can't pair up as a stereo pair. You can have it as a mono speaker.
All right.
So kind of defeats the purpose a little bit. And you think, well, they're not thinking about everything when they're designing these systems.
Yes, there's definitely a lot of them will stand or fall on how easy they are to set up, and some I've had that have been an absolute doddle to set up. I think certainly Samsung's wireless systems were very easy to set up, which I think is important. And the same was true of Denon's X5200. It's got built-in Wi-Fi and built-in Bluetooth, both of which were a doddle to set up.
Yep.
Conversely, and I know Ed can back me up on this one, there are some other manufacturers in terms of AV receivers, like Pioneer, for example, that are an absolute bitch to get to work. And that's I think it needs to be like everything now. People expect things to be simple and easy and quick and intuitive, and that's the entire basis of Apple's business model. And when things aren't, it can be incredibly frustrating. Yeah,
I mean, I've got to say, the first time I've ever spent time on a support page on a website trying to ask questions and get replies and find the replies to the questions I had. Maybe it's the way of the future. Maybe it's not designed for old codgers like us. Don't know. But certainly the Pure Jungle, which is coming up for review, is a nice system once you get it working. What else have we got coming up, Steve?
I've got BenQ's W1070 Plus, W1070 Plus, which is a sort of refined version of 1070 we've already reviewed.
So basically, it's a four-year-old chassis which they're sprucing up for the next 2 years.
They've given them. I noticed they've given the remote control a jazzy up new box to put it in. I can't really tell what the plus bit relates to yet, but I guess we'll find out. Yamaha's SRT 1000 sound base, which is obviously, as Ed's already mentioned, one of the prizes currently in the competition. So that's that. I've got to say that's really good. Yamaha do sound bases and sound bars really well. There's no question that's a market they've been in for some time, and they're excellent.
You would hope they would be good because they were one of the pioneers.
Yeah. I mean, they pretty much invented that marketplace. They were doing sound bars before anyone had ever heard of them, or before the whole market exploded. But that's really good. So a great prize. We've also got Greg's doing Devolo DLAN 1200 power line adapter. He's reviewing that at the moment, and obviously we've got a Devolo DLAN power line adapter as one of the competition prizes. You just mentioned the Pure Jungle MQA wireless speakers. Ed, you've got a couple of things coming up. Mass Fidelity Relay DAC and Aurora Sound High Face Pro DAC plus bus, is that right?
Yeah, it's good. Isn't it? Right. Let me try and explain this. The Mass Fidelity Relay. It might sound like something that Geordie LaForge would be working on in Star Trek, but actually, it's a Bluetooth DAC. Now, before you go, oh, not another one of those. Read the review, and then make some decisions for yourself. It's a genuinely clever, beautifully implemented and beautifully built little thing. And if you have a system where you don't have built-in Bluetooth like some of the later AV receivers, just have a look at this. I know that we've already looked at two different Bluetooth DACs. We looked at an Arcam one and a Musical Fidelity one. have a look at what this one does and consider it on its own merits. Now, it's interesting we've been talking about user friendliness, because the Aurora sound, two things. One, we're only 26 days into 2015, but I can say with reasonable confidence that the Aurora is probably the ugliest product I'm going to review this year. They really aren't much to look at. I did my best for photography, and also they are. You need to have some understanding of USB drivers and other bits and bobs to get them to do anything at all. So you have been warned. However, again, if you don't have the ability to do a high quality USB connection to your existing system, or you're looking at a piece of equipment and you're not sure whether it's going to meet the requirements because it doesn't have USB, please do have a look at that review. It is a really, really unbelievably good quality USB system, which bolts onto existing amplifiers and the like. It takes up very little space. In the case of just the DAC part of it, it doesn't need the power supply. The power supply is an optional extra, so it doesn't necessarily need a mains connection, and it's capable of truly outstanding performance. It's very specialized and it's brutally ugly. So just again, have a look at that and see what you think. And then between now on the 26th, when we're recording this, and the end of the month, I've got lots of other things to shovel out.
Thank God
at
for
speed.
that.
Yeah, don't worry. There's
Save
more
for next week. Save for next week.
Yeah.
Well, I think you did a really good job of selling that review, and hopefully 2 or 3 people will actually go and read it.
Yeah, I love you too.
Games is next. Right, so moving on to games news, but we were going to talk about this in hardware, but then there's 2 or 3 things that on the back of this apply to gaming. So we're going to discuss it very quickly. Here, Microsoft Windows 10 was announced last week. Was it last Tuesday? Last Monday or last Tuesday? The wave of the future, or a load of bollocks?
I don't know a lot about Windows these days because I don't use it anymore. And I never understood why people buy Windows updates. I mean, every PC comes with Windows built in. Does anyone actually buy it? But if you do, you can get Windows 10. And the big selling point, it seems to me from watching news coverage of it, has been the HoloLens, which makes you look like Geordie LaForge, Ed.
Well, good. You can buy a mass fidelity relay and operate it through your HoloLens.
Now, is it just me, or have manufacturers not realised people don't want to wear glasses? 3D didn't fail because people don't want to wear glasses. Google Glasses disappeared because people don't wear glasses. Do they really think people want to sit around there with a pair of glasses on so they can see things in 3D through them? Guessing not.
Well, I'm inclined to agree. I do think that the HoloLens is not the bit that I think has me interested about Windows 10. And I when I say interested, I don't necessarily mean I'm rushing out to buy it. Although I am interested to note that I think I technically fall within the category of being potentially entitled to a free update, which is interesting in so much as Microsoft taking a leaf out of Apple's book there. What I do think is quite interesting is the idea of this scaled platform across different devices. Because at the moment, obviously, you've got Android, which makes little or no penetration into things that aren't handheld. Apple still, I mean, the margins are blurring slightly, but it still fundamentally churns out iOS and OS X. The idea of there being a single ecosystem, I mean, obviously Microsoft is in the business of, is sort of beginning to remember that it does a lot of its actual income comes from supplying big solutions to big companies. And the idea of a company being able to buy into the system and everything just operates the same way across lots of different devices, I can't help but think that that's probably quite a good idea. That stunned you into...
No, I'm having a cream egg. Right, Mark.
What, one of the new horrible
Were you
recipes?
moaning about how horrible they tasted last week?
Yeah, I've overcome that.
Yeah, they've got crystal meth in them. He doesn't care anymore. He just knows he needs more cream eggs.
Right, so Mark, Windows 10 and gaming, how's it going to work?
Well, are we talking the HoloLens first, or are we... Because that obviously is somewhere into the future and isn't necessarily going to link up with gaming depending on how you view it. Though it's obviously it's interesting the fact that everyone else is jumping aboard the kind of VR bandwagon, that Microsoft would go instead to augmented reality. I'd agree with you to some extent, Steve, that people just don't like the idea of kind of cumbersome headsets and the like. But I do think there's kind of more scope for augmented reality in the fact that you keep, even in the kind of more total simulations, you've got your peripheral vision, so that obviously makes it a little bit easier. And also the fact that this is kind of a local, everything's done on board, so you've got no wires coming out the back of you or anything like that. You're not going to walk around in the room and suddenly find yourself grotted or something. I think there's scope there. I like the idea that certainly, say, you can link it in with 3D printers and how they'll become prevalent in the next decade. So designing simple little kits and the like. But as far as gaming use goes, well, obviously there's a problem that it's a self-contained unit, so it's not just something that you're going to plug into a console and use the console's processing power. There's also a slight problem with what kind of games you can put on it. Anything like that, augmented reality, we've been there before. If you look back at how Kinect was marketed to begin with, the initial Project Natal demo, it looked wonderful. It looked fantastic, but it's little things. It's comes back to things like tracking, things like latency, and a kind of a millisecond here and a millisecond there, or just not picking up a certain gesture can just absolutely break something. But they showed off a little kind of a Minecraft type demo where you can build a little kind of, you could be building a little model village or something like that. And I'm surprised that no one else thought, well, perhaps you could build your own kind of models, virtual scale Xtrix or something, build it around the room.
Ooh.
But how else would you be able to spend thousands and thousands of pounds of real money on real scale Xtrix?
That's a fair point.
I think, Mark, that's the thing, isn't it? With all this new technology, be it Kinect or VR or HoloLens, it's only going to be successful or adopted if it's adopted by the games developers themselves. Because I think one of the things with Kinect is it's never really been heavily implemented in any actual games. So.
Well, the other thing was, we're coming back to 3D. That was, the big saviour of 3D was going to be 3D gaming, and we experienced it at trade show after trade show after trade show, Steve, and it worked and it was good, but nobody was interested in it.
Yeah, I never understood the failure of. I always thought 3D gaming was the obvious, one area where people would, embrace it, and it bombed. It failed. It was absolutely disastrous in the gaming industry.
I think you can go back to like 3D films. What works best, because it has to be tailored. It has to be, you have to think about things in a slightly different manner. And perhaps with 3D games, as a medium, it's kind of come a long way. But I think trying to ask it to evolve even further before it's really kind of perfected even kind of decent writing and various other staples that are kind of accepted in things like cinema would be a little bit too much. Going back to 3D, augmented reality, virtual reality, it's still a question of, can you get people who really want to utilize it? Can you get people who want to make something genuinely new on it? So it's got some kind of a unique selling point. If it's simply kind of bolted on, then it's not gonna mean much. But with regards Windows 10 and the gaming side of things, I thought the most interesting part of it was the ability to stream Xbox One games to the PC, which means you can install an Xbox app on a Windows 10 machine, and you've got remote control of your Xbox One, and you can play it in a different room. And given the fact that Sony have got the PS TV, so certainly for large families, if someone's watching, the X Factor or Downton Abbey or whatever, you can play in a different room. I think that's a pretty big deal.
But what's the lag going to be like on that?
Well, just over your own home network. Obviously, it's going to vary wildly, as people have been finding with the PS TV.
Yeah.
But from the, I think there was a demo, and it seemed to look, from all accounts, pretty solid. But obviously, these things, it depends on your home setup, doesn't it? Yeah.
Well, you just have to look at the TVs that we review and the guys review, and just a few milliseconds can make quite a bit of difference. You could be one frame behind And if you're playing online games, I'd imagine that is a disadvantage. And if you're going to be playing in a different room over another network on top of that, it'd be interesting to see.
Yeah, but I mean, as Ed says about the idea of a kind of ecosystem, I think this is something that Microsoft are increasingly coming towards. And another thing that came out was the idea of the cross-platform play would be pushed a bit more between Windows 10 machines and Xbox One. Obviously, this is something that has been tried before in the past with kind of varying levels of success for online games, but certainly with a certain type of game, if you consider that there are some titles where player count can dwindle radically, if you can tap into the basically Microsoft's stranglehold to a certain extent on PC gaming and the huge amount of people it's got in its camp there, that's a massive bonus for the Xbox One, I think. If they can manage to get enough games out that, harness that huge player base they've already got.
Okay, so HoloLens Windows, are you excited about it? Do you see it being a big thing for games?
Do I see it? Again, like with a lot of things, Microsoft they've got big ideas. They've shown often that they've got the kind of technological chops to put together a very slick looking presentation and some great kit, and they've got some R&D departments who show just mind-blowing things, but in kind of real world application, I don't think it will change much, sadly.
Okay, excellent. So is that games news?
Yeah, that's games news.
Hey Steve, what's at the cinema?
This week I saw two films, one of which
you.
was released this week at the cinema, and one which was released the week before, but was such a great film that I thought I'd talk about it as well. So the first one, the one that was released the week before, Whiplash, which is as much a clash of wills as it is a clash of cymbals. Ka-ching. And I would never have thought that I could find a movie about jazz drumming so utterly compelling, but it really was brilliant. I thoroughly enjoyed it. It's essentially the story of a very driven young drummer who's learning jazz at a music school in New York, and gets into the studio band, which is the school band run by a character played by J.K. Simmons, who I remember from things like Spider-Man. He was J. Jonah Jameson. And his approach to teaching is basically obviously taking a leaf out of the drill sergeant from Full Metal Jacket. It's very much a question of bullying and pushing people to the point where they're going to break in order to try and find the one person possibly that might be a genius. That's his philosophy, basically. And I thought the film was great on a number of levels. One, it's thoroughly entertaining. It's genuinely funny at times. J.K. Simmons, the acting in it is superb, and J.K. Simmons in particular is utterly terrifying. But also it remains ambiguous about the characters. So if you watch it, you think, well, the character played by Miles Teller, the drummer, and in credit to him, he does his own drumming as well. He's very driven to the point where he excludes any friends. He drops his girlfriend. He just wants to be a great drummer, and therefore, you kind of think that this approach will work with him. And it does. It does drive him to the point of almost madness in order to try and be the best possible drummer. And in the same way, the character played by J.K. Simmons, the teacher, his rationale, his modus operandi, you could question it and say that he's wrong to do that, but he's totally unapologetic about it, even to the very end of the film. That is his way of working and his way of getting the best out of somebody. And he thinks, he keeps using an example of Charlie Parker, who was playing a routine session and didn't do a very good job, and one of the guys in the session threw a cymbal at him, and it was that made him go away, practice, and become the great jazz player that he eventually became. And he said, what if no one had thrown that cymbal? What if they just said, good job? The worst, at one point goes, the worst two words in the English language are good job. I just thought it was a fantastic character piece. It's really about two, literally, there's Miles Teller is in every single scene of the film there, and then the relationship between him and his teacher are the center point of it. It ends with a jazz
jazz off.
Yeah, well, kind of. Yeah, it is almost a jazz off, actually. It is utterly compelling. It's funny. It's exciting. It's interesting. Also, and I was thinking, watching it at the cinema, I was thinking this would be a fantastic test disc when it comes out on Blu-ray, because the soundtrack's fantastic, and there's loads of Obviously, loads of drumming, so there's plenty of like bass in there, and I thought this would be a really, really good demo disc when it comes out. But I thought it was a fantastic film. Really enjoyed it. I'll give that a solid 8 out of 10.
I've read a few reviews who have different viewpoints of that. Is it an abusive relationship?
Totally, yeah, totally abusive. And obviously in the modern age, everyone's lovey-dovey, touchy-feely, no one wants to offend anybody. You say, well, you just couldn't do that. It was total bullying. The way he behaves is totally unacceptable. But as I say, it's ambiguous in the sense that he never, even to the end of the film, that teacher says, like, this is the way I want to get, I think I'll get results this way, and I will, I might discover it. I mean, his one sort of driving thought is that by doing this, he may one day, and by his own admission, he just hadn't up to that point, might one day find a genius, push someone to become a genius. And I can tell you one thing, the words, not quite my tempo, who'd have thought? I never thought they could be so utterly terrifying. But by the end of the film, if you hear him going,
I saw that,
not quite my tempo.
I saw that clip, which is
that's just that clip. It goes on through the whole film. He suddenly just closes his fist, and everyone stops playing. He goes, not quite my tempo, and it's really scary. J.K. Simmons, I think, probably will win Best Supporting Actor at the Oscars in a few weeks' time because he is absolutely superb in it. But credit goes to Miles Teller as well. Who's a young actor. And he's got a difficult role, but with any film centered around musicians, if you can't fake it, you've got to try and make the actual playing look as real as possible. And it certainly looks to me like he was playing drums the whole way through. I mean, I'm not a jazz drummer. I'm not even a fan of jazz normally.
Well, you see, I was going to say, has this got you all jazzed up for the Bristol show?
Well, my problem with jazz usually is if you go and see live jazz shows, it's 4 blokes playing 4 different songs simultaneously. This is
yeah, but they all finish on time.
yeah, exactly. Start on time and finish on time and do what they like in the middle. This at least is, they're playing written jazz music, so they're following an actual tune. I thought it was excellent. I thought the music was great. I thought it's a really, really good film. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I know Ed's wife saw it last week and was equally enthused.
Yeah, well, obviously as a music teacher, my wife has sort of taken it to contain some interesting hints and tips. So
start throwing chairs at her studio.
Yeah, we'll see how we go. I think we're going to push for some geniuses. But no. She completely echoes your thoughts. She thought it was a really, really, really good film. I look forward to visiting the cinema sometime in the next 4 to 5 years. I'm going to see it on Blu-ray, I imagine.
Well, I'm going to the cinema on Friday, but I've got a funny feeling I'm going to go and see this next film. So what was the other film you went to see, Steve?
Yeah, the other film is Ex Machina. Not Ex Machina, for those who can't pronounce it. Ex Machina, which is written and directed by Alex Garland, who also wrote Dread and wrote 28 Days Later and Sunshine. And if you're a literary person, he wrote The Beach and Tesseract as well. And this is his first film as director. And, Alex Garland's works... but certainly the recent stuff he's been doing, things like Sunshine, for example, he often takes interesting ideas and then sort of, takes them to their logical conclusions. This doesn't always work. I mean, I like Sunshine. There's things about it I like, but there are things about it that just are absolutely stupid. And Ex Machina is no exception in the sense that it has some really interesting ideas in it. It's brave enough to be a real proper science fiction film talking about genuine, science fiction issues. It's not action packed at all. It probably won't find much of an audience, I suspect, because it's probably a bit too clever for a lot of people, in all honesty. But I thought it was fascinating because what it addresses, and we were quoting from Blade Runner at the beginning of this podcast, and Mark mentioned the Voight Kampff test earlier. That's kind of what this film is basically about. The whole film's a Voight Kampff test. What happens is that a guy who works for what is effectively Google, but it's an unnamed. They call it Bluetooth Blue Book. They call it Blue Book. That's the company in the film. They're a giant internet company, and they're sort of run and owned by a billionaire who's a very secretive and isolated billionaire. And this employee wins a competition to go to his home. Miles away up in sort of mountains or very isolated. And he gets there and has to sign an NDA and discovers that he's been working on AI and he has this android. And he wants him to basically perform the Turing test. So the Turing test is, the test is a way of testing an artificial intelligence to the point where if you can't tell it's artificial intelligence, then, it's passed. And that's the basis of the entire film. You've got Oscar Isaac, who plays Nathan, who's the billionaire owner of the company who's developed this AI, and you've got Donald Gleason, who's the son of Brendan Gleason, who's the employee who goes out, who wins this competition and spends a week with him, basically testing the robot's called Ava, played by Alicia Vikander, and like I say, it's full of really interesting ideas about what it is that makes you human. How do you test? I mean, obviously, it doesn't quite follow the Turing test, because the Turing test you wouldn't be able to see what you were testing. Whereas Ava is a rather attractive android. I mean, admittedly, she's got like see-through body parts, but you've still got knockers and a bum and a face. And I think that's all you need, really. Trust me on this one.
You're not getting that cat now.
But it raises some interesting questions, and it's intelligent and well made, and but I will say there are some really big plot holes towards the end. I was sitting there with Laura thinking, like, well, how do they do that? That doesn't make a lot of sense. I don't think it's quite as great as Kaz made it out to be. I think he gave it 9 out of 10. I'd say I'd give it 8. I think it's certainly challenging. I think it's brave. It's it only really has 3 characters in it, and it takes place in a single location, so clearly relatively cheap to make. Although I've got to say the effects are superb, particularly where it comes to Ava, where there are. You can see through her arms and legs and the things inside. It's beautifully done and seamless. Very well performed. Donald Gleason and Oscar Isaac, both of whom are rising stars. And both of whom, strangely enough, are going to be in the new Star Wars movie together. Are great. Alicia Vikander certainly must get credit for playing the AI, because even though it's meant to be indistinguishable from human being, there is something slightly off about the way she speaks and behaves, which gives you that feeling that she is she isn't human. And particularly in latter parts of the film where she starts to look more and more human. And I think it was a challenging and interesting film. And whilst it does have some plot holes and flaws, and it suffers the problem of not having any likable characters, which always makes it difficult to empathise with the people involved. But it's still a fascinating and real hardcore sci-fi movie, which are pretty rare these days. So worth seeing if you do get to the cinema.
So let's move on. Blu-rays released next week, and there's 3 of them, Steve. Yeah,
we got Gonga, which is the new film from David Fincher, which I saw at cinema and thoroughly enjoyed it. It's a bit of a potboiler based upon a best-selling novel by Gillian Flynn, I think it is. But good to see a nice performance from Ben Affleck, who gets a lot of stick for someone that I quite like. Rosamund Pike, Oscar nominated, is actually fantastic in it. And as usual, it's got that cool, clinical, rather stylish direction from Fincher. But yeah, I did enjoy it. It's manipulative. It's not always obvious, but generally it is fun. And I think if you're managed on, like I think I said during the review of the film, if you're managed on the rocks, don't go and see it with your missus, because it might not come out so well. But otherwise, it is a good laugh. So definitely worth picking up. Maps to the Stars is David Cronenberg's new film, which I saw on the plane back from Vegas, and very strange movie. I mean, even for Cronenberg, this is a strange film. It's full of great performances, particularly from.
But how do you know they're great performances if you don't know what the hell's going on?
Well, no, I mean it's basically it's set in Hollywood, and it's a massive dig at Hollywood and stars, and it's full of some really, really barbed comments and some really funny bits as well. I mean, really funny. And Julianne Moore is fantastic in it. Mia Wasikowski's in it as well. John Cusack. It's got a great cast. It's just towards the end, it kind of really goes off the rails, and I'm thinking, like, what is going on here? But the bits where they're taking the mickey out of Hollywood are excellent and very funny, and you can tell that clearly Cronenberg despises Hollywood, which I don't think is any secret. I mean, he's made all of his films in Canada or in London. Actually, done a lot of films in London recently. But there's some fantastically funny bits about. And some quite funny. Like Carrie Fisher pops up as herself at one point, which is kind of funny. There's loads of name dropping and that sort of stuff. It's great, but it does go very strange towards the end. And
did you see the episode of QI that she was on?
Yes,
Carrie Fisher.
Did she have any idea where she was?
No, she didn't know what universe she was in.
Sit back on the smack.
So I think she was probably wishing she was by the end of the show. Sat next to Jimmy Carr for half an hour. Thinking, what the hell?
It was
Get my agent on the phone.
Yeah, it was entertaining. The final one, it's another Arrow Films, isn't it? Another Arrow Films release, this one.
Yep, Thief, which was Michael Mann's first theatrical feature, starring James Caan as a thief, as the title might suggest, as a safecracker basically. And it's I've actually seen Thief, and it's very good. It's very Michael Mann. It's kind of that sort of thoroughly detailed study of another, sort of an underworld. In this case, the criminal underworld, which he's done a few times. So I'm thinking specifically of Heat here. In the same way that Heat, was very heavily researched, very realistic in many places, and has a great cast. And this is the same. It's a very sort of slight story, really. It's about a guy trying to get out of the business, really, and become legit, and being sort of dragged in for one last job. So it's very cliched in that sense. But the performances are superb. He cut people with real criminals. Obviously, no longer criminals, but had done time. So it was, there are lots of people on it advising on it, and a lot of ex-coppers too, of which. What's his name? Hang on. Dennis Farina, that's it. Yes, Dennis Farina. Yeah, uses a lot of ex-coppers, including Dennis Farina, who worked with him for a long time afterwards. Sadly passed away, I think, last year. It's classic Michael Mann. So it's got lots of neon, wet streets, night shots. You can see him already having a fairly established style, even from his first feature film. Great performance from James Caan, and an interesting movie. And from reading the Cass's review, which is already up, a great package from Arrow Films in terms of picture quality, sound quality, and all the extras.
Obviously, Michael Mann loves his grain as well, Steve. So I'd imagine that the transfer on this has been handled well, because it is an Arrow film, and Arrow have been doing some really splendid transfers recently. Yeah, they have. I mean, they've done some fantastic work. I mean, basically Arrow and in the States Criterion, two of the best companies for really doing first-class transfers, working with the directors, director photographies, etc. It looks like in the case of this film, because interestingly, unlike the Criterion disc, the Arrow disc includes both the theatrical cut and this is the director's cut that's just been released. And both are available in 1080p, but the director's cut one's had a full restoration with, I think, Michael Mann oversaw it himself and colour timed it again. So there's been some corrections to get a look that he wants. And I think his films, anyone who's familiar with films, I know there tends to have a bit of a blue push to him, a bit of a cyan look to a lot of his stuff. And this is no exception. But it does give you the opportunity to compare the original sort of theatrical cut with this new director's cut. So that's nicer than they're giving you that option, which wasn't available on the Criterion disc, which I actually own myself. But yeah, no, Arrow have done some great stuff recently. I've got up into quite a few of their really. They did With Now and I recently last year. Time Bandits. You think and the Big Trouble in Little China, which I got. Life Force, which is I recommend to anyone who wants to spend 2 hours watching a woman walk around completely naked without going and buying pornography. Great. Really good work from Arrow, I have to say. Yeah, spot on. So out of those three, which one would you recommend that our listeners go and purchase? Depends. If you are a fan of Michael Mann and a completist, I think definitely worth picking up. Thief, I think, is a fantastic package. If you're a David Fincher fan, then you probably go for Gone Girl. Tough call, but I'd probably say Gone Girl, if you haven't seen it, it's worth picking up or checking out, because it is enjoyable. It's fun. It's really good fun. It's kind of trashy, actually. It's not really highbrow at all, but hey, it's fun. So to wrap up on this week's podcast, let's stick with the movie theme. And some people sometimes ask for translations in some of the phrases that we come out with, especially myself being Scottish. We say things properly, whereas you English people just don't know how to speak the language. For movies, Steve, you stumbled upon stuff that is really quite amusing when it comes to translating film titles into foreign languages. Yeah, what made me think of it was when we were talking about the new title of the Bond film, Spectre, because I was saying, well, at least that's going to be easy to use as a foreign title, because it doesn't require a lot of translation there. And I guess Skyfall the same. It's not the meaning is within the film, but it doesn't have to be translated that much into foreign languages. And having lived in Hong Kong and in Tokyo, where you see Western movies and you look at the titles of those films and they've been completely changed. For example, in Japan, the title of Up is Old Carl and His Flying House. And Dances with Wolves was, and I get this right because Laura was telling me this because she could speak Japanese, but in Japan it was Dancer with Ouza was the Japanese title of Dancing with Wolves.
In Japan, the title of Army of Darkness, the third Evil Dead movie, is Captain Supermarket. And this is in France. Apparently, the title of The Matrix was The Young People Who Traverse Dimensions While Wearing Sunglasses. So, there you go.
Cool Runnings in France was bizarrely called Rasta Rocket for reasons I've never fully understood as well. Kind of missed out on the whole business of the Winter Olympics there, but, you know.
Oh, what's this one? As Good as It Gets in 1997 is translated as Mr. Cat Poop in China.
I love, American Hustle in China. It was United States Cheat Bureau.
I'm pleased to see that this list that we've got here has got my favourite, which is what they called Die Hard 2 in Denmark, which is Die Hard Mega Hard. I think they should have gone with that as a worldwide release, if I'm honest.
I've always said that Die Hard 2 should have been called Die Hard 2. No, was it Die Hard 2, Die Harder? It should have been Die Hard 3, Die Hardest. Surely. That was the obvious title.
It would have saved us from any more of them, certainly. We'd have run out of superlatives.
They certainly got quite creative towards the end then with Live Free or Die Hard, which was called Die Hard 4.0 in this country anyway. But the most expensive of your life, Hungary.
I've got to be honest, I think I'm going to refer to Finding Nemo as Seabed General Mobilization henceforth.
That's because in China there is no word for robot. So I don't know what that had to do with Finding Nemo, by the way, but... story rather. Anything to do with story is general mobilization. So toy general mobilization, Toy Story. Super people general mobilization, The Incredibles. Food general mobilization, Ratatouille. And machine implement people general mobilization, Wall-E. I mean, that's going to get you in, isn't it? You think, that sounds amazing. I must go and see that film.
Well, I mean, we're picking on films here, but there are certain ideas and concepts that do not intrinsically translate well into other languages. My favourite, a carousel, a classic carousel with the horses that goes up and down. If you directly translate the Russian word for carousel back into English, it is, and I shit you not, horse tornado. And frankly, that is all my son is ever going to know them as, if I'm honest. Sod this carousel or merry-go-round business. Boy, do you want to go on the horse tornado? Yeah!
I think I've just found UKIP's film. See if you can work out which one it is. In Hungary, it was called Multinationals Go Home.
Team America?
No.
Foreign something?
No, it was I Love Huckabees. Multinationals Go Home in Hungary.
It's usually the Chinese that suffer the most because you've got a character-based language. It's very tricky to integrate Western words, and so you have to get pretty creative. I love the way that Liar Liar was Ace Big Liar, Bruce Almighty was Ace God, Austin Powers Ace Big Cheap Spy, and Bill Ron Burgundy or Anchorman was Ace Announcer. Although I love Anchorman 2's title in Portugal, F*** the News. And in Spain, to hell with the news.
To be honest, actually running on Twitter as we speak is UKIP film titles. We've got 10 things I hate about EU. Where's it gone? Harold and Kumar get deported. Honey, I deported the kids. The Fascist and the Furious. Invasion of the Job Snatchers. A Bridge to Farage.
Have you seen what the piano is called in China?
No.
Wretch, let me chop off your finger.
Their title for Once Upon a Time in the West is brilliant. Western Department of Memories. Which kind of makes sense in the basis of the film, but even so, that's out there.
Pride and Racial Prejudice.
So, guess the movie from its Chinese title. I will marry a prostitute to save money.
Pretty Woman?
Yes.
Shows how my mind works, doesn't it?
Okay, well...
Daily Mail. Sorry, I'll stop now. I'm done.
Probably best. And I think it's about time that we stopped as well. If you have any hilarious foreign titles that actually exist for American movies, then you can add them to this podcast in the podcast forum. And that's about it for this week. So all I need to do now is thank Steve Withers.
I've seen things that you people wouldn't believe.
Well, go on, say the whole speech.
No, do you mean the whole thing?
We've
been here a long time.
But I want you to sound more like Rutger Hauer when you do it.
Yeah, and by the way, happy birthday. He was 71 the other day.
Is he?
He was, yeah.
Perhaps I'll do a different one then.
Well, we'll be here all day.
Do the one about the magazine.
I'll do Leon's quote. Wake up, time to die.
Mark Botwright.
Do you like our owl?
And Ed Selley.
Is this testing whether I'm a replicant or a lesbian, Mr. Deckard?
Don't forget, you can follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Bookmark. Oh, I've got all kinds of images in my head now, Ed. You saying that? Don't forget, you can bookmark AVForums for latest reviews, news and video, and you can also leave us a rating on iTunes. I'm Phil Hinton, thanks very much for listening, and we'll see you again next Wednesday.